26 and 27. A new heart I will give you, a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove from your body the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and make you follow my statutes and be careful to observe my ordinances. And from Acts chapter 10, verses 17 through 29. Now, while Peter was greatly puzzled about what to make of the vision that he had seen, suddenly the men sent by Cornelius appeared. They were asking for Simon's house and were standing by the gate. They called out to ask whether Simon, who was called Peter, was staying there. While Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Look, 3 men are searching for you. Now get up, go down, and go with them without hesitation, for I have sent them." So Peter went down to the men and said, "I am the one you are looking for. What is the reason for your coming?" They answered, "Cornelius, a centurion, a righteous and God-fearing man who was well spoken of by the whole Jewish people, was directed by a holy angel to send for you, to come to his house and to hear what you have to say." So Peter invited them in and gave them lodging. The next day, he got up and went with them, and some of the brothers and sisters from Joppa accompanied him. The following day, they came to Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and friends. Peter went in and found that many had assembled, and he said to them, "You yourselves know that it is improper for a Jew to associate with or to visit an outsider. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone profane or unclean. So when I was sent for, I came without objection. Now, may I ask why you have sent for me?" The witness of modern wisdom is from Reverend Cameron Trimble, CEO of Convergence. Many congregations are content with their current state, enjoying familiar rituals, established routines, and long-standing community relationships. This satisfaction, while providing comfort, can lead to complacency. A satisfied congregation may resist change, believing that what has worked in the past will continue to work in the future. However, this mindset can prevent the church from addressing evolving needs and embracing new opportunities. To rise in today's dynamic environment, congregations must be willing to recognize the need for change. This involves assessing current practices, understanding the community's evolving needs, and being open to new ideas. God is still speaking. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Kathy. Will you pray with me now? Merciful God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our help and our Redeemer. Amen. My title for this morning is "Old Beliefs Do Not Lead You to New Cheese." This is, of course, the 3rd installment in our 4-part series on change. And our scriptures this morning focus on changes of heart and mind. The prophet Ezekiel prays for a new heart and spirit within us, while in the book of Acts, we witness just such a change in Simon Peter's life and ministry. Peter experiences a vision that challenges everything he knows about his faith. This personal transformation triggers a chain reaction that will spread through the early church, altering the course of Christian history. Change is nothing new for the church or the still speaking God we celebrate each Sunday morning. And yet, as we acknowledged before, the word change often makes us a little uncomfortable. Why is that?
Well, as I mentioned, I've been reading a little book I came across
across a few years ago, Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson. It's just a very little book, but it tells the story of two mice named Sniff and Scurry, two little people named Hem and Haw. And the book, originally aimed, I think, at people who are in the midst of a vocational transition, offers insights for anyone experiencing a season of change, personal, relational, societal, or vocational. I believe this parable has valuable lessons for us as a local church, but also for the church universal. In the book, two mice named Sniff and Scurry and two little people named Hem and Haw live in a maze. For food, they must find their way to a number of cheese stations. Cheese Station C becomes their go-to destination until one day the cheese runs out. The mice, having noticed the cheese supply slowly dwindling, instinctively begin searching for new cheese, while the little people, with all of their complex emotions and ability to rationally consider all of the reasons and probabilities, well, they react with confusion and anger and fear. Hem is at first held back by his fear of the unknown, eventually overcomes it and ventures out in search of new cheese. His friend Haw, however, clings to the past, refusing to move on. Even when Hem offers to share his new cheese with him, Haw insists, "I don't want your new cheese, I want my cheese." On his journey in search of new cheese, Hem leaves behind several lessons for Haw written on the wall. Lessons such as, having cheese makes you happy. The more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it. Smell the cheese often so you know when it's getting old. And if you do not change, you can become extinct. One of the most profound questions that Hem asks himself, and another of the lessons that he puts on the wall there, is what would you do if you weren't afraid? Isn't that a great question? I imagine Peter might have asked himself something similar after receiving his vision. Knowing he would likely face ridicule and resistance, Peter courageously accepted that invitation, ventured out into the unknown, trusting the still-speaking God to lead and guide him. And for all his faults, Peter was never one to hang back in fear. I've been asking myself that same question all week. What would we do if we weren't afraid? Well, later in the book, Dr. Spencer Johnson writes, "What you are afraid of is never as bad as you imagine. The fear you let build up in your mind is worse than the situation that actually exists." For many of us, it is the fear of failure and of looking foolish that keeps us back. For others, it might be the fear of success and whatever new responsibilities might come with that. While fear can be a healthy survival instinct, we also know it can also hold us back when we give it too much control over our lives. In today's rapidly changing world, we must also recognize the need for change within the church and all the ways we seek to be the church in the world. Cameron Trimble, one of our UCC leaders, at one point, a possible president of our denomination and now a church consultant, says, "To thrive in today's dynamic environment, congregations must be willing to recognize the need for change." We know the world around us is changing. We know this. Sometimes I pull out my phone or my watch and I think I am living in the Jetsons or Star Trek or Inspector Gadget. We know the world is changing, and yet we often struggle to change how we do what we do here on Sunday morning, how we are the church in the world, not just on Sunday plus V plus F, which is greater than R. I'll explain. Change equals dissatisfaction with the current state, D, plus the vision for a preferred future, V, plus clear first steps to take, F, which must be greater than the resistance to change, R. When enough people are dissatisfied with the current reality, enough people share a vision of a better future, enough people see practical steps to realize that vision, then you finally have the right conditions for change. Trimble gives an example in Grace Congregational Church, a small church in a Midwestern town which thrived for years with traditional services. Then, over time, the town's demographics shifted. Attendance declined. Families stopped coming as much as they had used to. The leadership ignored this reality for years, blaming secular culture and soccer and wringing their hands. Finally, they tried a different approach, inspired by a young woman in the congregation. She suggested befriending people in the community and asking what the church could do to make their lives better. Asking, going door to door, asking, what could our church do to make your life better? Through town hall meetings, they learned the community needed family-oriented events, support for raising children in this complex time, and a chance to be involved in social justice projects. With these new insights, Grace Congregational launched an after-school program, organized community service projects, and created a college scholarship fund. Older members adopted younger children as surrogate grandchildren in the congregation. And almost without their trying, the church began to grow again. Not because growth was the goal, but because they embraced a new understanding of what it meant to be the church. Imagine if this church had allowed their fear of failure to keep them from making these changes. Imagine if they had let their concerns about offending or disappointing others hinder their progress. Their vision, their impact of the church would have remained far too small. Just as Peter's idea of God's kingdom expanded when he welcomed strangers and accepted the invitation to be a stranger himself, we too must be open to new directions. As we go on in this book, Who Moved My Cheese, him leaves behind a few other important lessons. Old beliefs do not lead to new cheese. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy new cheese. And movement in a new direction helps you find new cheese. I think about Peter. He didn't know the earth-shaking change he was about to introduce to the community of believers. I highly doubt that he was following his three-point strategic plan. He simply listened to the Spirit, let go of old beliefs, and took a step in a new direction. There's an old Japanese proverb which says, "A 1,000-mile journey begins with a single step." Isn't it wonderful that we don't have to have the future all figured out before we take that first step in that new direction? Isn't that amazing? As we embark on a new year, change is on the horizon for many of us, personally, and all of us who call this community of faith our home, in large and small ways. The world around us has changed, and what worked in the past, in many ways, doesn't work in the present. It's probably going to work much less in the future. It's both exciting and scary to imagine a new future for our church or the church universal. But we're not alone. The still speaking God is with us. The Spirit is our guide. And so I ask us, what wisdom and insight can we take away from these stories? Perhaps we begin by naming our fears and anxieties. asking ourselves whether they are really as worrisome as they seem. Perhaps we begin by turning outward toward our neighbors and communities and asking what those around us see as the most important things we could do and be in this place and time. When you are inside the maze, it's easy to focus on what we might lose rather than what you might gain by venturing forth. But when I close my eyes and I imagine our church in 10 years, I see so much. It is so beautiful. I see our buildings as a hub for community service and support and solidarity. I see a place where music and the arts inspire and connect, where people of all walks of life find true community and nourishment for their souls. I imagine our church as a refuge and sanctuary for survivors of trauma and addiction and poverty and violence and discrimination. And while I don't have a complete vision of all the steps to get from here to there, I know this. We will need to make room for new ways of being and doing church. We will need to support the new vision with our time, talents, and treasure. We will need leaders ready to be change makers. We will need people to pray for and with us every step of the way. And we will need to let go of old beliefs about what is right and proper and open our hearts to what the still speaking God might do in our midst. Now, for the past 2 weeks, we have ended this message time with a time for conversation with one another. I'd like to do that one more time. With all consideration for the introverts in our midst, I'd like to do this one more time. Invite you to turn to someone who you don't know, someone who might be very different from you, and to have a brave conversation with them, to take 5 minutes to ask some of these reflection questions printed in your bulletin. I'll give you a 1-minute warning when we're about to come back and sing our next song, but I invite you to take just 5 minutes with a partner and ask the questions: what shifts when churches focus on their community impact over their own survival? What changes when we ask our neighbors what they need, imagine, and hope for? How would a church go about gathering such insights?